Hey guys, in this video I want to talk about how to create the kind of experiments that will move truth from the head to the heart. Because people will not act on what they know, they act on what they believe. So how do you create experiments that prove that your main idea is true? Again, just to recap, this is step 3 in my 5-part outline. This is so important because it gets the doers involved, the kinesthetic type learners that need to get their hands on the truth. And also, again, it helps people be convinced of the truth before you move to application and apply it to everyday life. So how do you create these kinds of experiments? So here's my kind of 3-step process I use. Number 1, I brainstorm all kinds of illustrations that could prove the main point. So let me just give you an example of one of my favorite ones. So I was teaching at one point a few years ago on John chapter 15. And it's a great passage because it teaches a couple important truths. One, that we have to be connected to God to produce fruit for God, right? This is not self-help, it's God-help. But then also 2, that the purpose of spiritual disciplines is to help us produce fruit. They're not an end in and of themselves. I actually had a really hard time thinking of illustrations. So I thought of okay, well, maybe I could talk about plants and how they work. Maybe I could even do a demonstration of grafting plants. But then I just tried to think of all kinds of other things like that. What is something that has to be connected to work? And I just started thinking of all kinds of things. And eventually I came up with the idea of just, in our day and age, electronics, right? Electronics have to be connected to power to work. And so I started playing with that idea. And then I just started thinking of all kinds of electronics that would make a fun object lesson, right? Like microwaves, toasters, TVs, right? I just thought of all kinds of electronics that have to be plugged in to work. So step number 1, brainstorm all kinds of illustrations. Step number 2, you take some of the best of those, the 2 or 3 best of those that you've come up with, and you ask yourself, is there a way I could have the students experience this illustration instead of just me explain it? What I did in this situation is I decided to use a Waffle Maker. And I actually have posted this video of me teaching through John 15 with the Waffle Maker. And so check that out if you want. And I loved it for several reasons. Number 1 is it engages a lot of senses, right? You got sight, you got a little bit of sound as the waffle hits the iron and sizzles. Then you have smell as people are smelling the waffles being cooked. And then even when we were done, I let students eat the waffles. And again, the point is that we're more likely to be convinced of the truth of something and remember something and internalize it the more senses we involve in the learning process. Now, I've done this before where I brainstorm illustrations. I ask myself, could they experience this illustration somehow? And in this case, I came up with an answer. I came up with the waffle iron. It worked out great. But sometimes you get to step number 2 and you still don't have an object lesson or experiment. And at this point, you want to do something that can be hard to understand at first, but the step is to abstract up and then start over. So here's what I mean by that, right? Let's just stay with this example for now. Let's say I didn't come up with any great illustrations. Abstract up means make the idea more abstract. So you have more abstract concepts and more concrete or real world concepts, right? So vine, branches, that's very concrete. Waffle maker, that's concrete. Something needed to be connected to work, that is more abstract. And so you would abstract even a step up from that if you couldn't come up with anything. So what is the abstract idea Jesus is getting at? Then once you get that idea, anything that has to be connected to work. Then you start the process over. Now you brainstorm illustrations again. What are things that have to be connected to work? Car batteries have to be connected to the car to work. You're going to go on and on, right? And at some point, you'll get an idea that your class or congregation can experience. And this is just, number 1, it's fun. People enjoy it. A lot of people think this is really cheesy. And I understand that. I often feel cheesy giving these illustrations, but people remember, you guys. So, brainstorm illustrations. Ask how they can experience those illustrations. If you get stuck, abstract up and repeat the process. That is how you can create a great experiment to go with your next message or teaching time. I hope this was helpful for you. If you need other resources, check out my website, makeyourmessagegreat.com. I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe to this channel, and that way you won't miss any of my free resources coming out. So I hope you take what we've talked about today and use it to create messages that change lives for good.